bottom of Kuf Mem Amud Aleph, second line from the bottom. The Iked Debai Leilidach Gisa. Just we did it yesterday, but we went through very quickly, and then that'll lead us into the last part of this discussion. There are those that taught the series of Imtim Salomar questions in the reverse, and we said practically speaking, it does make a difference in halacha which order of the Imtim Salomars go, but as far as practically for the change in this Gemara, it doesn't make that much difference. Balchov Mahu Shimai bin Achasim. The first question was, if there's an estate, we want to be able to know what kind of debt against the estate is going to reduce the value of the estate, such that it changes whether the primary heirs are the sons, or whether the primary, well, they're not heirs, but the primary recipients of the value of the estate are going to go to the daughters. And so if we reduce the value of the estate enough, then the money is going to go to the daughters. If the estate has enough value, it's going to go to the sons. So now, what if you've got somebody who is owed money? The father had a loan of some kind, and so now the Baal Chov is owed that money. It's supposed to be coming, that repayment of the loan is going to come from the estate. So does that reduce the value of the estate? The second circumstance was Bas Ishto Mahu. What if you say in that circumstance that does reduce the value of the estate, but what about if there's a slightly lesser significant attachment or debt against the estate? And the circumstance was the daughter of his new wife, right? The daughter is from the first marriage, and he agrees when he marries this woman that he's going to support this daughter for 5 years. We said, Mahu shetimait bin achasim. Does that reduce the value of the estate? And we said that, he said yesterday, that might be a little bit different, because if this child dies, then there's no collection from the estate. So whereas by a loan, even if the person who is owed the money dies, his heirs have the right to collect that loan on behalf of their parents' estate, right? It's one estate owing another estate. And then the next one is almonaso mahu shetimait bin achasim. What about also the third circumstances? What if the widow wants to, the debt to the widow, what does that reduce the value of the estate? And that's the least likely to last for a lengthy period of time. And that's because she could get remarried, aside from potentially that she dies, in which case the estate doesn't have to support her. If she gets remarried, the estate doesn't have to continue to support her. New point here is almanasa ubas. And we started to ask that question. What if you've got the widow and the daughters, right? So each of them come from a place of obligation through the ksuba, right? This ksuba is going to establish that the almana, the widow, is going to have to be sustained from the estate. Also, the daughters are going to be sustained from the estate. Which of those is more powerful? Which is of the ones of those two? We now have an estate. It's established that it doesn't have a significant enough value to be able to pass on to the heirs. So now that it's going to be a battle between the almana and the daughters, the widow and the daughters, which one gets money first? So Amar Lei. So this question was being posed. Rabbi Bava was asking Rabbi Yirmiyah this question. So he said to him, Amar Lei, he said to him, Zilha idna v'talamacher. He says, come back tomorrow. I don't have the answer right now. And that's a very important point to be able to mention, that sometimes you get asked a question, you don't know the answer as a rabbi. It's okay to say, you know what, let me think about it, right? I'll go consider it and come back tomorrow. He didn't have the answer with him. Kiyasa, so he came back the next day, because they say every time there's a line in the Gemara, like it's significant. Otherwise the Gemara could just say, yeah, somebody give an answer. No, he told him, I don't have the answer. Come back tomorrow. So he came back the next day. He said, Amar le Pashut Mihas Chada. He says, I don't have all the answers to all of those questions that we described, but I've got an answer to at least one of your questions. Amar of Abba, Amar of Asi. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rabbi Asi, Asu almana eitzel habas, kibas eitzel ha'achin, b'nechasim mu'atin. He said that there's the establishment of the widow in comparison to the daughters is identical to the way the daughters are compared to the sons, the brothers.
The almana gets first.
That's right. When it comes to the small, and they're going to spell it out, when it comes to a lower property. The almana is the widow. Thank you for always correct me if I wind up reducing, if I don't translate. After we'll do it like 100 times, we'll be able to get the verbiage there. So ma bas eitzel achin, just like the daughters collect from the brothers. Habas nizonas va'achin yishalu apsachim, and in that circumstance, the daughters are going to get the funds. The brothers have got to go knock on the doors. Alf almana eitzel habas. So too is the same circumstance when it comes to the widow and the daughters. Almana nizonas. The widow is going to have priority. She's going to get the money. And v'abas tishal apsach, and then the daughters have to go seeking, right? So the primary obligation goes to the widow. That at least he knew the answer. As far as the other imtim salomers, those he didn't have the answer to, but that one he did. Okay, now, when you get to the two dots, you get a sigh and go, new topic. So, okay, the mental gymnastics from yesterday. Let the stretch come out. Okay, now we go to the next thing. The last line of the Mishnah, the last section of the Mishnah had Admon. Admon Omer, and the Gemara will requote the line of the Mishnah that they're going to be addressing. Admon Omer, Admon had said about this idea that the daughters are going to get instead of the sons, Bishvil Shani Zachar Hifsadati, just because I am male, so I should lose. So it sounds like he's making some kind of, whether that halakhically he's saying, I don't agree, males should get instead of the daughters, or, which is what the Rashbam had seemed to imply, or whether it was like the Ramban who said that no, he was just exclaiming that it is sort of a unexpected law, right? That's not how we would expect it. So Mike Omar, what is it that Admon is troubled with? What is bothering him? What is the significance of being a male that should entitle you to the money before the daughters? Right? That's what the way he makes it sound is, I'm a male. Why shouldn't I get the money first? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Hachi Kamar. This is what he means. Bishvil Shani Zachar. He says, because I'm a male, V'roi ani lasok b'Torah. I have an obligation to learn Torah. Right? The Vishinantam Levanecha that we learn, that we say in the pasuk in Kriya Shema, that we have an obligation to teach it to our sons. Sons, the obligation of learning Torah for men is an obligation which is all the time. Right? You can stop if you have some other mitzvah tasks to do, but otherwise we're under constant obligation to be learning, right? And it isn't necessarily practical learning. It's any type of learning, esoteric and thought-provoking and philosophical. We got to do it all. But that isn't the case for women. For women, the halacha, the halachic aspects, understanding of what's expected practically is their level of learning, but they don't have a constant obligation to be involved in learning. So, that's where Admon's coming from, says Abaye. He says, why should we need the money more? Because we have a lot more to do. We don't have time to spend earning money because we've got to be learning more Torah. So he says, because I'm a male, so I have got to be involved in learning Torah. Hifsadati, so now I'm going to lose out. So Amar le Rava, Rava says, back to Abaye. Abaye and Rava are contemporaries. They live at the same time. You see a lot of times in the Gemara, Abaye and Rava, and sometimes Rabbi as well. And we'll get to Gemaras that explain their relationship. And maybe one time when we're not rushing through, we'll be able to take a little bit of time to discuss. So, Amar le Rava, Ela me'ata man da'asik b'Torah, hu diyaris, delo asik b'Torah, lo yaris. You're telling me that when it comes to inheritance, we're going to evaluate the worthiness of the heir to receive the money based on how much they learn. According to what you're saying, let's say you've got a series of brothers and one guy's in Kollel and the other guys are workers. So the money should go to the Kollel guy because he's learning more Torah. Is that how that works? No, we never see that in inheritance. The rules of inheritance never favor somebody simply because they're involved in learning more Torah. So therefore, Abaye, that's probably not the explanation. Ella Amar Rava, Rava says instead, rather, this is the explanation. Hachi Kamar. Bishvil Shani Zachar. He says, look, I'm male. The Roy Ani Liyarish bin Echasim Merubin. And the general principles, the D'oraisa principles of inheritance would be that the male gets the funds before women, right? Then we learned that in last parak that the inheritance transfers over to sons, and then if there are no sons, then it goes to daughters. So that means males have a more direct line for inheritance, and they're the primary recipients of inheritance. So therefore, I'm a male. And these are the sisters. Why should the males get skipped over in order for the money to go to the sisters? It does not seem like that's how the Torah set it up. So therefore, just because in the circumstance, he said, just like in the circumstance where there would be plenty of funds in the estate, so the sons would get it. So if Sadati bin Chasim Muatim, why should it not be the same case when there's less funds in the estate? Which, in fact, that was, as we said, the Ramban, that is the halacha. But Admon is just expressing that it is kind of counterintuitive because that's not the way the Torah had set it up. Okay, so that's the conclusion of our first Mishnah. We move on to the next Mishnah. Next Mishnah.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Just to go over it yesterday. So are the daughters like a milve loive relationship? Or is it because then they're like the Baal the Baal Choiv can never go after. It's like if I have a lien on a property and you have a lien on the same property, depending on where I fall,
who comes first, right?
But if I get paid first, the second can't sue me. The second could sue the person they have.
So the requirement to give the daughters the money starts after the death of the father. So therefore, the Baal Chov is primary. It comes before the daughters.
Right.
So therefore, if you've got both, so you're right. They're both claimants on the estate. But the earlier you are as a claimant, the more rights you have.
But if the daughters get paid by the sons give it to the daughters.
Yes.
The Baal Choiv would still go after the person who owns the
They could still collect. Yes, they would go. So if there's plenty of money in the estate, the Baal Chov is going to go after the sons.
Right.
You could also go after the daughters if, let's say, there isn't enough money. The Baal Chov is the creditor, the person that
the lien. The person who has a lien on a property.
Yeah. So when he goes to collect, he's going to, I guess, that at a point is that if the money isn't sufficient, that let's say the brothers don't have enough money, it's sufficient to pay off the loan, can the creditor then go after the daughters as well?
But they're not inheritors. That's why they didn't yarshin the father.
But the Baal Chov's, the creditor's loan predates the daughter's rights to that money. Right. So he has the right to be able to make established claim first.
If he has a blind child or an infirm child, does that
no
into the commission at all?
Blindness, any other of those kinds of things, as we just said, sons are sons, and we don't establish Now, what we learned in last parak was the right of a father to be able to gift his possessions over to his various children and divide it separately, right? But these are the straight rules of inheritance.
The daughters like Menos Lafan, like that's what the last parak. They could inherit if there's no son.
Correct.
And it would be the same.
How many lines down are we?
We are now at the Mishnah, which is towards the middle of the page, right? So if you see where it says Masnisim, that is the Mishnah. Hiniach banim ubanos. Okay. Vitumtum. So now we have a new wrinkle in the works here. Okay. So person dies and he leaves sons, he leaves daughters, and he leaves a tumtum. A tumtum is somebody who it is indeterminate which gender he or she is.
They're both gender.
No, not both. Both is androgynous.
Right.
This is neither are visible, right? There's a piece of skin that's covering up everything, and so nothing is external, and there's no distinguishing characteristics that can determine whether this is a male or a female. Now, there's three ways that we can look at a tumtum. There's three ways we can view this tumtum. Either they're a male, we just don't know, or they're a female, and we just don't know, or there is the possibility, and those that hold in halacha, that is, we're going to see that opinion, that this is a third gender class, not genders, third sex, right? A third sex class, male, female, and tumtum. Okay, so therefore, is it a male? Is it a female? Or is this some third category? So those are the possibilities. So now, what happens? Bisman shenechasim rubin. Now we're going to apply the principles we were in the last Mishnah. If there's lots of money in the estate, plenty of money in the estate, we know the sons are supposed to get it. So what happens to the tumtum? So then the tumtum comes, he says, I want to be able to get my piece of the inheritance. So the sons are going to say, well, how do we know you're a boy? You could be a girl. So therefore, you don't collect with us. So he has to be able to collect from he gets pushed over to the girls. Now, we're going to discuss what that means. The way this sounds, the way the Mishnah sounds, this is where we're going to start off when we start the Gemara understanding this, that he's either a boy or he's a girl. Those are the two options the Mishnah is looking at. As far as the third option, as him being a completely different gender, that at this point doesn't look like the Mishnah is considering. So therefore, if he comes to the sons and he wants to collect, the sons say, you can't collect unless you can prove you're a son. You can't prove it. Therefore, which should you collect? Should you collect like a son or should you collect like a daughter? The answer is, you're one or the other, so therefore you're going to collect by whichever one gets less money. Therefore, since the sons are entitled to a real portion of the estate, the sons can push him off and say, collect like the girls. At least he gets that, he collects from that amount. Or he, she, it, whatever it is. Right. Sorry, I keep saying he, but it's not he. Okay? That's exactly not what it is. Okay? Nechasim muatin, on the contrary, though, if we're a circumstance where the estate does not have sufficient possessions, in which case the larger portion is going to go to the daughters, right? Then the daughters say, well, you can't collect with us unless you can prove you're a girl. He, she, it can't prove it. So therefore, then the tumtum would collect like one of the sons in the lesser amount. So basically, it's one or the other, but can't prove it, so it's going to always get the lesser amount.
Isn't it Suffolk Deraisa? So in this case, it'd be Suffolk Deraisa, and so we should treat him like a.
So this is not going to. We're not. So Suffolk Deraisas and Suffolk Derabbanan lechumra or lekula. This means that when you have a doubt in a Torah question, so then you're going to go leniently. You're going to go strictly, and when you have a doubt in a rabbinic law, you go leniently. That is a rule which applies to isurim, when it applies to prohibitions.
Right.
When it comes to money, we have a different set of rules to apply. We're going to apply the principle of hamotzi mechavera lavaraya, somebody who wants to take something from somebody else, then possession is 9/10 of the law, essentially. Whoever is the owner is presumed to remain the owner unless the other person can prove that their claim is valid. So therefore, this tumtum has to prove their claim to take the money away from those that possess it, in this case, the sons or the daughters, depending on the value of the estate.
And the claim would be male to take more money. Because female is always sure.
Well, it depends, right? If the estate is large, in which case the inheritance is going to the sons, then the sons are getting the larger portion, and therefore he takes the feminine portion. If the estate is small, in which case the sisters are taking more of the estate, then he gets the male portion. Always he's going to wind up not being able to prove his position and taking the lesser one. Okay, so that's what's happening here. And this is based on the principle of Hamotzi Mechaveira Alav Haraya. For the sake of completeness, we should know that that isn't the only way potential to resolve conflict when it comes to financial laws. That is the way the Chachamim, the rabbis, we hold this way, that's the way they resolve conflicts of money, right?
What again?
By establishing whoever is the person in possession, we presume that person has the rights to the money, and the person who's trying to withdraw the money from that person has to prove their side. Okay, so always the burden of proof is on the person who's trying to claim money, right? That's what we call hamotzi mechavero, somebody who's taking from his friend. Allah haraya, he has the burden of proof. Okay, that's how the Chachamim hold. The Chachamim are in a disagreement with Sumchus. Sumchus has his opinion, which is momon hamot v'safek. When you have funds that are in doubt, yachloku, you split them. And this argument goes back and forth, and you'll find it through many, many Mishnayos, where you'll see the Gemara will establish and say, well, we're going to split that money in that circumstance, and that is Sumchus's position. Sometimes you'll see Mishnayos will say the Rabbanan's view. Sometimes this Mishnah seems to take the Rabbanan's stance on Chacham's stance. Sometimes you can have a Mishnah that also says that we split it, and that will be Sumchus's perspective. Okay, but know that this is two different ways of resolving. Essentially, with Sumchus, right? If we're in dispute over some amount of money, then neither of us can prove whose it is, then we'll just split it. Okay, and that's how Sumchus relies. Okay, yeah, Bava Mitzia. Ha'omer im teled ishti zachar. Now, person says, if my wife has a male, a son, yitol mana, then I'm going to give my son a gift of 100 zuz. That's what he's going to give his son. Okay? Yolda zachar, if she gives birth to a male, then yitol mana, then that satisfies the condition. And in fact, the son gets 100 zuz. Nikeva, if he says that if it's a daughter, masayim, I'm going to give 200 zuz. Yolda nikeva, no telas masayim. And if it's a daughter, she takes 200. Okay? Im zachar, let's say he then combines the two. Im zachar mana im nikeva masayim. If he says, if it's a male, I'll give 100. If it's a female, I'll give 200. The yalda zachar unikeva. Now we're going to translate this as the Rashbam says. And the mother gives birth to a male or a female, not a male and a male or a female. So then, zachar notel mana. Then if it's a male, then it fulfills the condition of his condition on being a male, and he's going to be 100. Nikeva notelas masayim. If it's a daughter, then he's going to take 200. Sounds pretty obvious. The point the Gemara is trying to make, and we're going to see this from later on, is that if he establishes that he's going to give 100 for a son, 200 for a daughter, and then his wife has twins, he doesn't give anything. Why? Because he might not be so thrilled he's having twins. That's a huge financial burden. So therefore, that might not be what he was in for, right? I'll give 100 plus 200 or 200 and 100. That wasn't what I was in for. So therefore, by stating I'm going to give this for a male, this for a female, he's indicating that he had no intention of doing something for both.
To the child or to the wife?
This Gemara sounds as though he's giving it to the child, which is going to create huge problems. So hang on to that. It's a great point, right? He's giving it to the child, right? And we'll explain why that's huge problems. Yolda tumtum, what if the child is a tumtum? Okay, so now, Eino notel, he's not going to get anything, right? Because now the question the Gemara is going to want to know, right? Obvious here is, well, why can't he get 100?
Right. Because at least he's either or, and this way he should be able to get the lesser.
That's correct. So you see, that's where we're headed. Okay.
He's not happy having a children because most.
Okay, so that's a potential answer, right? But the thing though is that he can't. It's a matter of understanding what his intention is, right? His intention was to give a male 100, so this is a male. At least could be a female, but at least 100. So we'll see. Okay, so just to point that out, this is where there's a contradiction in the Mishnah. To understand what it is, must be that at this stage of the Mishnah, remember we said there's a third option, which is that the tumtum's nothing. It's not male, not female. It's a third sex. Well, then that's going to contradict the first part of the Mishnah,
Right.
which seemed to indicate that it was one or the other.
Right.
So that's where you start to look at the texts of the Mishnayos with this kind of level of scrutiny, and you can start to realize there's some real challenges in this Mishnah. Within the Mishnah itself, there are real challenges. Okay, so pointing them out because the Gemara is going to point them out. We may as well point them out as we go through them. Im Amar kol masha teled ishti yutol. So what if he says, whatever my wife has, I'm going to be happy, and the child should take such and such a gift. So then, hareza yitol. Then the tumtum can take. Why? Because the tumtum is a child.
Yeah,
So therefore, it's not specified. So therefore, we don't presume he meant male, female, and then he had a tumtum and therefore doesn't get anything. If he said, whatever my child is, so then he's going to take. Vim ein sham yoresh elahu. Now, let's say there's nobody else in the estate. The father has one child, and the child is a tumtum. In that circumstance, who yoresh esakol, he's going to get he, she, whatever it is going to get everything. Because, as we say, miman avshach, either way you look at it. If it's a son, so then he has rights to inherit. If it's a daughter, so then there's no sons, in which case she has right to inherit it. So as long as the tumtum is the only child, the tumtum is going to inherit everything. Tumtum's restrictions only come when the tumtum has brothers and sisters. Okay, and that's what creates the challenge. Okay. Says the Gemara. We're going to start attacking that contradiction that we noted. Dochin also v'shakel kivas. So it says that if there was plenty of money in the estate, so the brothers are going to say, well, you're not one of the brothers, go take with the girls, which means that then it says, so that means that we're presuming that he's going to go to the daughters, he's going to collect like a daughter. Okay? Because why? If he's only two choices. Not son, therefore at least daughter he's going to collect. Okay, but hak tani seifa. Then, as we pointed out at the end of the Mishnah, yalda tumtum, that if he says, I'm going to give 100 to a male child and 200 to a female child, and then there's a tumtum, eno notel, then he doesn't take anything. The tumtum doesn't get anything. Well, why not anything? The tumtum should get something, so there's our contradiction. So Amar Abaye, again, we get Abaye and Rava. So Abaye says his explanation is, Dochen also ve'enlo. You know what the first part of the Mishnah means? He goes to the brothers say, go collect with the sisters. But that doesn't mean, the Mishnah doesn't clearly specify that he actually gets to the sisters and gets money. Rather, he's a ping pong ball. He goes to the brothers, they say, go get with the sisters. He goes to the sisters say, one of us go get with the brothers. And he gets nothing. And therefore, that is consistent with the end part of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah, throughout the entire Mishnah, is really holding that the tumtum doesn't get anything. That's Abaye's way of reading this Mishnah. Rava Amar, Rava says not so. Omar dochano soviyeshlo. The brothers push the tumtum away, and then he's going to go to the girls and he's going to collect, like we had read the Mishnah ourselves. Okay, how do you explain the end part of the Mishnah then? The seifa also Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The seifa is a different position, is a different opinion. Now it's a interesting thing that Rava answers this way, that Abaye doesn't like this answer, as it seems clear, because we don't like to say that the Mishnah represents 2 points of view unless the Mishnah says, hey, somebody else is sharing their point of view. The fact that the Mishnah doesn't specify I'm switching points of view right now is a little bit tricky. It's possible that it can happen. So therefore, that's what Rava says, that it's less likely that we've got that the first part of the Mishnah should be explained like Abaye explains it, which doesn't sound like the text. So he prefers to keep the text as explained as it is, and to explain it as two different points of view within the same Mishnah. Whereas Rava says, whereas Abaye says, I'd rather explain the first part of the Mishnah to not quite mean what it says, but keep it consistent throughout. Okay, that's how they're arguing. Now, it says Ditanya, but we switch it to Ditnan. What's the difference between Ditanya and Ditnan as we're getting into become professional Gemara learners? Ditnan means we're about to quote a Mishnah. Ditanya means we're about to quote a Brisa. Mishnayos, as we said, are more authoritative and authentic because they are well vetted. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote the Mishnayos down. Brisos are not always as reliable in text. It's always more powerful to quote a Mishnah if you've got one. This is Ditnan. It comes from a Mishnah instead of coming from a Brisa. So we're switching the text from Ditanya to Ditnan. Yalda tumtum vandrognus. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omar, Ein Kedusha Chol Aleihen. Here's an interesting case. Okay, there's a fellow, and he has an animal that's pregnant. Now, the animal has never given birth before. So the Torah tells us that if an animal gives birth to a male animal firstborn, that animal is called a bechor, and the animal goes as a sacrifice, or it is given to and if the animal is a blemish, it goes to the Kohen. Bottom line, he's not going to get to keep this animal. Well, he's got a clever idea. It turns out that he owes a korban olah. He had made a pledge at one point. He got an aliyah, and he says, I'm very excited. I want to give a sacrifice to the temple. Korban olah. Korban olah is one that's brought to the Beis HaMikdash, and it's completely burnt, and that's what he wants to give. An olah has to be coming from a male animal. Okay? So he makes the following declaration. He decides, look, if the offspring inside this animal is a male, so then it should be a korban olah. If the animal is a female, then it could be a korban shlomim. But this is what he declares. Now, the reason why that works is because he establishes that the fetus inside the animal is now already consecrated on a higher level as a higher level sacrifice than the firstborn that comes out. The firstborn animal, the fetus, doesn't receive sanctification as a firstborn animal until it's born. Therefore, at the time when it's still inside the mother, the animal has no sacrifice qualifications. He's certainly within his rights to elevate that animal to a sacrifice. And then, since it's already sanctified, then when it comes out, it's not a bechor. What does he gain out of it? He gets a free olah out of it, right? He had an olah that he pledged, and now instead of giving away this first animal as a sacrifice as a bechor, now he gets to fulfill his pledge of an olah. Okay? Well, this is what he decided to do. And then he's hedged his bets. If it's a male, it's this. If it's a female, it's this. And then the animal comes out, and it's a tumtum or an androgynous, and it's neither. So now, okay, what happens? Okay, Ein kedusha chol aleihen. Then the answer is there's no kedusha.
But that's not a proof that it's either male or female, or not.
That's a proof that it's neither.
But it's not,
because otherwise your animal would be suffix one or suffix the other. Not that it has no kedusha,
or it's considered a mum.
Why
can't it be considered a mum?
That's a good question, right? I don't know if that a tumtum is considered a mum. Yeah. It would still have kedusha, but it would be considered an animal with a blemish. The fact that it says that it has no kedusha at all
means it's neither.
That's right. It's a good point, right? But it's neither. Okay. So this is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion that it has no kedusha, which means that he is holding that tumtum is neither male, neither female, and that's how Rava explains our Mishnah. That at the beginning we're talking about the rabbi's opinion generally, and therefore they hold it's either male, either female. But then comes the next part of the Mishnah. The end part of the Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion, holds that a tumtum is neither. Okay. Meisvei. So now we ask the following question. Tumtum yorish kebain, venizon kebas. Okay. So this comes from a brisa. Okay. This brisa makes the following statement. Okay. A tumtum inherits like a son and also consumes property like a daughter. So now, what does that mean? So that means there's a case, not that this always is the case, but there is a case where the tumtum is going to be a son, or like a son acts, and sometimes like a daughter. So bishlam el Rava. So this is very simple according to Rava. Rava already explained how this works, right? If the estate has plenty of money, then the brothers are going to say, you're like a sister, and he goes and collects like a sister.
Is that called the Leplekes though?
The tumtum is going to be unhappy. Right? That is definitely always the case. The tumtum here is a little bit unhappy, but yeah, the answer is yeah. I mean, he's going to be unhappy.
Well, the
right?
status of it doesn't matter whether he's very masculine or feminine, or
Does not matter. Correct. Because
so a bearded lady should go with one of the girls.
Correct.
Okay.
And halachically speaking, if you have a very effeminate man, he's still one of the sons, right? It does not make.
Obviously, but
Today, would they give a DNA? Like they would find.
I would wonder whether you could give. It's a fair question, and I will do research and post if I can find a good article on this is the purpose of the WhatsApp chat for the good in-depth questions. Okay, whether in modern times you could do an X-ray and find out what's going on in there, right? You could find out whether there's a uterus, right, or this. I mean, it can be something that you could do an MRI and see what's inside. So, can you resolve the question that way? Or is it external features that make all the difference? I don't know the answer, so I'm going to have to take a look and see.
Check the chromosomes.
Or if you could check chromosomes, there should be ways of determining it. So, would we have resolved the issue of tumtum in modern day science? So we will investigate that. I will look into it, find a good article, and post online. Okay. Okay. So now, Bishlam al-Rava Yoresh Kibain b'nechasim muatim. So fine, according to Rava, it's very simple. He already told us how it works in the Mishnah. He says that that if there's plenty of money in the if there isn't enough money in the estate, then the daughters are going to get it, and then they're going to tell this tumtum, go collect with the sons. That's how he collects with sons. And Venizon Kabas, and the circumstance where he's going to get like the daughters is B'nechasim Merubim, when there's plenty of money in the estate, and then the sons are going to say, you can't collect with us, go to the daughters. And so therefore, we see clearly how there's an opportunity for the tumtum to be collecting with the boys and collecting with the girls. Ela Abaye, but according to Abaye's explanation, so then, my Nizon Kibas. There's no circumstance where he's going to be able to get the money from the daughters. If there's plenty of money in the estate, the sons are going to go tell him, go to the daughters, and the daughters are going to say, you prove you're a daughter, and then he's going to get nothing. The tumtum gets nothing. So how is Abaye going to explain this brisa? So Abaye says, Ulatamech. According to your logic, though, he says, wait a second, L'Rava, my Yorish Kibain, what does that mean he inherits like the son? Remember that the circumstance is that there isn't enough money in this estate to be able to give to the brothers. So therefore, the daughters are collecting all the money. So he goes to the daughters and he says, I want to be considered a daughter. He, she, whatever it is. Sorry, I keep using the he pronoun. I presume that's it, right? Who knew that Daf Yomi was going to get so confused in pronouns on the second day? That's correct. So, okay, so the tumtum goes to the daughters and the daughters say, you're not one of us. So then it says, go back to the sons. The thing is, the sons don't have any money in this case because there wasn't enough money in the estate. So what do you mean he's going to go back and collect from the sons? So the answer is, Ella royally reish, the ainlo. All it means is that once he gets turned away by the daughters, he gets what's appropriate to the sons, which in this case is nothing. But when the Mishnah says he gets from the sons, it doesn't literally mean he gets real money because there isn't any money. It just means he gets what the sons get. And that's all there is to it. So Hachinami, Roy Lizon Ve'enlo, same thing he says by me with the circumstances that that he would be appropriate to receive this amount of money, but he doesn't have, and that's what the meaning of this brisa is. There are certain circumstances where he's considered like the daughter or like the son. It just means that when there isn't enough, he's not going to get, but he is considered in that category. Okay. Next thing, Ha'omer. Now we get into something a little bit simpler with no pronoun confusions issues. Ha'omer, the Mishnah says, Ha'omer im yolda ishti zachar. The guy makes this, he says, if I have a son, I'm going to give him 100. If I have a daughter, I'm going to give him 200. That's what we said. So now, we have a concern about the Mishnah's case. Now, the guy could say anything. The guy could say, if I have a daughter, a son, it could be $1 million. If I have a daughter, 50 cents. Yeah. But the Mishnah didn't say that. The Mishnah specifically says a case and gives this example. Daughter's going to get twice as much as a son. So the question the Gemara asks is, Lamemer de basadifa le li ben. That means it's better to have a daughter than to have a son. Because the plain case of the Mishnah is the son's only going to get 100, the daughter's going to get 200. Must be it's better to have daughters than sons. Okay? V'hamer Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. But Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Kol she'eno meniach ben liyorsho HaKadosh Baruch Hu molei alav evra. Then anybody who doesn't have any sons, Hashem is angry at him. Hashem is angry at him. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Va'avartem es nachal. So when it comes to the pasuk by inheritance, it says that if a person doesn't have sons, then the inheritance transfers over to the daughters, labito. Now, the word that it uses to transfer inheritance over to the daughters is v'havarting. And that shoresh, which means avar, to pass over, is ve'ein havara ella avara evra. The word avara also means anger, right? Evra also is a word for anger, and the Torah doesn't make mistakes in its use of words. There could have been a number of words that the Torah could have used in order to indicate inheritance passes to the next of kin. It uses the word that sounds almost like anger in order to indicate that a person who doesn't have sons, Hashem is angry. Now, Mefarshim point out that doesn't mean somebody's got 8 girls, Hashem is angry at him. It refers to somebody who is not interested in having sons and is not making the attempt to have children. Right? That circumstance, the person is not making the attempt to have sons, so then Hashem is angry at him. The person should make the attempt to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of pruravu. Now, Yom Evra Hayom, this is the pasuk that indicates that the word Evra means anger. From this pasuk, that today is a day of anger. Ahuli in Yerusha, ben odifle, linyan harvacha, bito adifale. So we see that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying that sons are very important. So how can our Mishnah say that daughters are more than sons? The answer is, depends on what you're talking about. When you're talking about inheritance, so then sons are better, right? Sons are going to come before daughters when it comes to inheritance. But when it comes to child support, daughters need more money. That's just a reality. Daughters are more expensive. They need more money. Therefore, when he's going to give a gift to his future child, he's going to give his daughter more money than he gives to his sons because they need it. Okay?
Would that be like favoritism though?
Yes. And therefore, and as we say, that there's a difference between equality and equity, right? As we say, if you could imagine, at least in education world, imagine that you have a fence and you've got 3 people trying to look over the fence. One is really tall, one is kind of, medium, and one's kind of short. So the short person, is having trouble looking over the fence because it's too tall for him. So I got to get him a stool, right, for him to stand on so he can look over the fence. But the thing is, it's not fair. How can I give one person the stool and not give everybody? But I don't have enough money for all 3 stools, so forget it, right? It's unfair. I don't want to cause a machlokas. Equality says everybody's got to get the same thing. Equity says that everybody is supposed to get what's appropriate and what's necessary for them, right? That's the principle. This daughter needs more, and therefore, when it comes to support, the daughter gets. Okay, that's the educational side point here. Okay. Ushmuel Amar, Shmuel says, I've got another explanation for what's going on in this Mishnah. Amar hacha b'mavakeres askinon. This is, we're talking about the firstborn child. Okay, this is where Yehuda's point gets taken into consideration. Okay, this is where we're talking about the firstborn child. The Rav Chisda, it's like Rav Chisda says, Damar Rav Chisda says, Bas techila, if you have a daughter first, if your firstborn is a daughter, Siman Yafe Lebanim, that's good for the sons. Okay, so, Ika da'amri demaravya le'acha, the Ika da'amri delo shalta ba'ina bisha. First possibility is because she helps raise the brothers, right? You get the oldest daughter, she helps take care of the younger kids. And the other opinion is because there is a problem of ayin hara. Somebody starts taking a look at somebody's got lots of sons, and they're like, oh, I'm kind of jealous of how he's got all these sons, and I'll get jealous. The oldest one is a girl, then you see him walking around, he's got some girls, he's got some boys. There's less of a challenge, people giving the ayin hara. What is this ayin hara, right? Is this some spooky hocus pocus? So you can go to the Likutei Moharan class afterwards and really understand the ayin hara, but if you want to ask a non-Hasidic perspective on the ayin hara, there is such a concept, and the Gemara talks about Eina Bisha, which is this ayin hara, where or hezek riyah, that just observing something, looking at something, causes damage to the thing that you are observing. Counting something that is observed is in a changed state. And I actually have some good science behind that as well.
About the notion of physics, right?
That is going to say that exactly one.
Changes.
That's light. What is that experiment with light called?
Like a
wave or a particle, right? What is that called? Where they shot the light when they would observe it.
That's when it's observed, right?
Light would act as a.
And I don't know that science has a great explanation for it, except that it is fact. Things that are observation of something does in fact change it, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore this concept of Eina Bisha is a real deal. and so therefore it's something that you have to be able to worry about.
That observing something can change the mazel of something, or is that what you were saying?
Yes,
it changes how right. That's what
right. So Amar Rav Chisda says Uladidi, when it comes to me, Binasan adifan li mi b'nai. He says that Binasan, my daughters, are better to me than my sons. Now, there's multiple explanations. What does that mean? Is that his personal opinion? He likes his daughters better than he likes his sons? What's going on there? So one position that the Rashbam seems to take is that he had sons, they died, and therefore he was sad, but he's comforted by his surviving daughters, and he was very happy with them. Tosfos does not like that answer at all, because he quotes many times through the Gemara, where you actually see Rav Chisda's children. So he says, if you see this Tosfos l'didi b'nosan adifan li b'bnai, Perish b'kuntras, the Rashbam says, Shalonis kaimu lo banim, he didn't have any sons that survived. Ve'nira, that doesn't make sense to harbe banim hayu lo. We see he's got lots of sons, Rav Chisda, Kiddush Kachinan, Rav Nachman Rav Chisda, Mar Yenuka, Mar Kashisha b'nei Rav Chisda. In different Gemaras, he's quoting Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda, V'chein Rav Mari, Rav Pinchas. He's got all kinds of sons throughout Shas. He had wonderful, amazing sons, and you see them quoted all over the Gemara. So what do you mean he had no sons? So instead, the Tosfos concludes that his daughters married huge Talmidei Chachamim, the Gedolei Ador. So even though he had amazing Talmidei Chachamim for sons, he said, my daughters are even more so because I had the best son-in-laws by my daughters. So that was in conclusion of the comment. So, right? So you can have lots of nachas from any of your kids. And that's the point. Okay. V'i boys ema, or else if you want, ha money, who's this opinion here? That the daughters are, this is Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda's position, that he wants to give more money to the daughters, as we're going to see. Hi, Rabbi Yehuda. Which statement of Rabbi Yehuda seems to indicate this? So, Ilema Rabbi Yehuda de Bekol. Maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda about Bekol. We're coming up, and this is a nice, great. It's great when there's a tie-in from Daf Yomi to Parsha, right? Avraham, it says when Avraham gets older, and Hashem blessed him Bakol with everything, right? That's why I have him benching Bakol Mikol Kol, right? And we say Hashem blesses us Bakol Mikol Kol. The word Bakol is a reference to the blessings of Avraham, and Yitzchak is blessed with Mikol, and then Yaakov is blessed with Kol. So Bakol Mikol Kol is a reference to the brachos given to all of the avos. Bakol is the bracha of Avram Avinu. So Avram is given the bracha of Bakol. Titania. So we learn in a brisa. Hashem beirachas Avraham Bakol. Hashem had blessed Avraham with everything. Rabbi Meir explains this pasuk. Shelo hayu lo bas. You know what the blessing was? He didn't have any daughters. That was the blessing. Why is that a blessing? He shouldn't have any daughters. The answer is because who's going to marry Abraham's daughter? He's living in Canaan, so now he's going to marry his daughter off to somebody who lives in Canaan. Everybody who lives in Canaan is an idol worshiper. So that's not very good. He doesn't want that, right? So now his daughter would have to leave Eretz Yisrael in order to be able to go back to where his family was from in order to find a match. And that's going to be a problem because he was very interested in making sure that his children, as was the case with Yitzchak, never left Eretz Yisrael. So he didn't want his daughter to have to go move out and go live in Haran where they were from before, which is where Yitzchak ended up marrying his wife from, that Eliezer had to go all the way out in order to find a wife and bring her back, right? But Avram didn't want his daughter to have to go out. So therefore, whichever way it would have been very stressful for Avram. So therefore, the blessing, according to Meir, was he didn't have a daughter, so that he didn't have to address that challenge. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shahaisa Lobas. No, the bracha was that he had a daughter. Right? Well, you don't hear of the name of the daughter in all the psukim. The psukim tell us he's got a son Yishmael, he's got a son Yitzchak. The answer is Ubekol Shema. Her name was Bekol, right? That Hashem blessed Avram Bakol. Hashem blessed Avram with Bakol. That was her name, and that's what the pasuk means. Amor dishmasle the Rabbi Yehuda bar sanami lo chasrei Rachman ala Avram. So, okay, so that shows you that Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that he wasn't left without a daughter either. Okay. However, all that tells us is that Avram had a daughter, right? Dadifa mi ben mishmasle, but doesn't tell us that his daughter was more precious or better than the sons, right? And that's the point we're trying to make. We're not trying to prove that Avram has a daughter or that the daughter is a blessing. We're trying to prove that daughters are more important to the father than the son. That's why he would give more money in our Mishnah. So that's not a proof from here. Ella ha Rabbi Yehuda. So rather, that's not the statement of Rabbi Yehuda that is interesting to us for this point. It's a different statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, we learned in a different brisa. Mitzvah lazun es habanos v'kal v'chomer lebanim da'aske batorah. It is a mitzvah to take care and feed and sustain your daughters, and all the more so, there's a mitzvah to take care of your sons. Why? Da'aske batorah, because they've got to go learn Torah. So therefore, you've got to make sure to provide for the education of your sons. Therefore, you must be feeding and taking care of them. They don't have to go knock on doors and try to figure out how they're going to eat. So therefore, that's how Divrei Meir, that's how Rabbi Meir learns. Rabbi Yehuda learns it differently. Mitzvah lazun es habanim. You have a mitzvah to take care of your sons. V'kal v'chomer lebanos, and it's all the more so for the daughters. Why? Delo lisazlon, because you don't want to degrade them. Daughters should not have to go knocking on doors in order to be able to get their food. They have to be taken care of to a greater degree, and that's the kal v'chomer. For sure, the support has to go to the daughter. El lahad detanya, but what are we about? We learned in a brisa. Yalda zachar v'nekeva. So the brisa says, so that's what Rabbi Yehuda seems to imply, that the honor of the daughters is more important. Okay. Now we have this other brisa. Yalda zachar v'nekeva. Let's say somebody gives birth. She has a son and a daughter. Hazachar notel shisha dinarim v'nekeva notel shnei dinarim. This brisa seems to go not like our Mishnah at all. This brisa says that if he makes the following statement, if I have a son, so then I'm going to give away 6 dinar. A dinar is 25, a gold dinar is 25 silver dinar, and a silver dinar is the same thing as a zuz. So,
what is the dinar?
A dinar is the silver dinar is the same as a zuz. That was the currency back then. So basically what he's saying is 6 dinar is 150 zuz, and if it's a daughter, I'm going to give 50 zuz. Okay, well, that sounds like this brisa goes very differently than our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was giving more to the girl and less to the son, and now we've got a brisa where it sounds like he's giving 3 times as much to the son and only 50 for the daughter. So the answer is, so b'mai, so what's going on here? Some Rav Ashi is the very end of all the Amoros. So therefore, when we go through all of the Abaye, Rava, and everybody all through all the generations, Rav Ashi, Ravina, and Rav Ashi are at the end. They're credited for finalizing the text of the Gemara. So when you get to a Gemara and you get to Rav Ashi, this is Rav Ashi is summarizing stuff at the very end and giving us the bottom line flavor of this. So Rav Ashi says, I'll explain what's going on here. Amrisa l'shmasa kamei Rav Kahana. So I told this, I said this brisa over, this statement over in front of Rav Kahana. B'mesares. So what happens is there's a the circumstance here is where there was a sort of a mix-up in what occurred here, and he's going to explain what happens. So he says, Damar zachar tchila masayim nekeva acharav velo klum. So he said, if I have a male first, right? So then I'm going to give 200, and a daughter afterwards, nothing. Nekeva tchila mana. If there's a daughter first, 100. Zachar achareh, and then a son afterwards, mana. Then it'll be 100. The yelda zachar or nekeva. Then what happens? Twins, or one and the other, zachar and then nekeva. V'lo yad'inan haiminayhu nafik beration. He doesn't know which one came out first. Okay, unaware. So now he doesn't know. If it's a daughter first, he specified that 200 is going to go. If it's a son first, he says, either way, he's going to give 200. He says, if it's a son first, son's going to take all 200. And if it's a daughter, then a son, then I'm going to give to the daughter 100 and the son 100. And now he doesn't know what's going to happen. So now, what's the halacha? So zachar shakil mana. So the male is going to take 100. Why is that? Because either way, if the male came out first or the male came out second, he'd be getting 100. Because that was what he said. If the male comes out first, he's going to get 200. If the male comes out second, the male is going to get 100. So either way it worked. The male comes out, the male's going to get 100. So the 100, that's for sure settled. So take 100, give it to the male. Okay. Because why? Miman of shach. Either way you look at it. Idach mana. Now the other 100, so that depends. So that, hava mamon hamota b'safek. We now have a money that is in doubt. Right? And the money, but why? Because if the male came out first, then this other 100 also belongs to the male. If the daughter came out first, this 100 belongs to the girl. So you have an argument between the two. And that makes this a mamon hamota b'safek v'cholkin. It's money that's in doubt, and we're going to split it. And that sounds like Sumchus's position, right? That's the way that Sumchus normally holds, that we're going to be able to separate. It also could be that it's not Sumchus' position, that it's the Rabban's, because there's nobody who's muchzik here. Remember, there's nobody here who owns that money. It's either giving it to this person or this person. So therefore, we'll split it. Now, if you split, you give 100 to the male, and you give, and then we're going to split. We're going to split the other 100. 50 is going to go to the girl, 150 is going to the boy. That's the circumstance that happens, the mix-up that happens, and that's why this Bryce is talking about 150 going to the male, 50 going to the female. It's not the same case as our Mishnah at all, where he was making a declaration, wanted to give more to the girl. V'haditanya, what about this Bryce? Yolda Zachar Nekeva, Ein Lo Elamana. Okay, let's say he has a son and a daughter, so then he only gives 100. So, Hechi Mishkacha. So what's the case there? Samar Ravina, as he said, Ravina is also at the end. So Ravina says and answers this one. Bimevasrani. This is a circumstance where the person says, I'm going to give a reward to anybody who gives me good news. Right? Somebody's going to bring me good news. Titania, here's the case. The Brisa says, Hamevasrani bima nifta rachma shel ishti. If somebody can tell me that my wife had a baby, so I'll be so excited, so then I'll give you a reward for it. So, Im Zachar, if it's a boy, Yitol Mana. So then you'll get 100, right? The person who comes and gives me the news is going to get 100. Yolda Zachar, Notel Mana. Then, right? And then if the firstborn is a boy, then I'll give him 100. Im Nekeva Mana. If somebody says to me that if the daughter is first, then I'll give 100. So then Yolda Nekeva Notel Mana. If that in fact happens, the daughter he's going to give 100. So now he's basically promised a reward of 100, but you're going to have to give me the news. So, Yalda Zachar Unekeva. Now they have twins. Zachar and Nekeva. Ein Lo Elamana. So then it's going to be, he only has to pay 100. Okay? That's all he has to do. So now, the Ha Zachar and Nekeva Lo Amar. Da Amar Nami, Im Zachar Unekeva Nami, Yitom Mana. El Lemute Mai, Lemute Nefel. So he says, okay, well, 1 second. Didn't we have that sort of a thing we were discussing in the Mishnah? He specified one of two choices. Either it's a girl or it's a boy. He never specified the circumstance. If it's both, why should he have to pay anything? Now it's both. So you should say he should give nothing rather than give a 100 one way or the other. So the answer is no, because his intention wasn't to eliminate the possibility of twins here. His intention was to eliminate the possibility that there would be a stillborn. So therefore, he had every intention of giving the 100 either way, and that's why he still gives over the 100. In the case of our Mishnah, it isn't clear that that was his intention at all, right? If he winds up with 2 kids, then it's a possibility that that wasn't the news that he was expecting, and therefore he doesn't have to give anything. Okay. Now, I'll try to do a little bit more before Ma'ariv. Hahu de Amar la lidvishu nichse lahai dima beres. So, person says to his. There was a person who said to his wife, she was pregnant. So, nichse lahai dimabart. He says, whichever one, whatever your child is going to be, so then I'm going to give him or her a gift. So, Amar Rav Huna, havim mizake leuber. So he says, what that basically is that you're transferring an ownership to an unborn child, right? You're basically giving a gift to an unborn child. Mizake leuber lo kana. And that does not work. Why? Because we have a principle of called that a person doesn't give anything to that davar shelo bo liolam, somebody that has something that doesn't exist in the world. You can't make a transaction with, right? How does a transaction? You have to understand the mechanics behind a transaction. A transaction requires a seller and a buyer. I have to be able to take something, and it could be a person, a giver and a receiver. But I need 2 people. I need to be able to make a transaction, and I need an object to be able to make a transfer. So I'm the makneh, that's the person who's making the transfer. The person is the kona, the person is receiving the transfer. And the object is the object of the kinyan that you're making this transfer to. But you need those 3 things in order for there to be a transaction. If a person takes something without somebody giving it to him, that's called stealing, right? If a person gives something and the other person doesn't want to receive it, then the transaction doesn't occur. And if there's no object, then how can you make a transaction also? That problem of there being no object is called davar ein adam makne davar shelo bo liolam. You cannot create a transaction with an object that doesn't yet exist. The classical example, okay? I've got a date tree and the dates are not growing yet, but I want to get an advance on the date tree. So I sell it to you. I say, I will sell you the dates that are going to grow on this date tree. And you say, great. Then later on, you decide, I changed my mind. You did not make a kinyan. You never owned the dates because the dates never existed. So ein adam makne davar shelo baliolam. Now, that actually is subject to a disagreement. Rabbi Meir holds consistently, we're going to see throughout the Gemara, Rabbi Meir consistently holds that you can transfer ownership to something that doesn't yet exist. Do we have a minion yet? Okay, good. So I'll just finish the sentence and we'll start. So therefore, you can't be makne davar shelo baliolam. However, as we're going to see, and we'll pick this up and we'll start it again tomorrow, the concept of transferring ownership of something that doesn't exist in the world, even according to Rabbi Meir, which he allows, is only if the object doesn't exist. If the person who you're giving it to doesn't exist, that's way worse, right? So here the person has the money, he has the desire to give it over, but he doesn't have a human being to transfer it to. The baby's not born yet. So therefore, how can you transfer anything over to an ubar, a person that doesn't yet exist? And that's where we're going to pick up. We're going to have lots of conversation over the next daf tomorrow over whether you can transfer something to an unborn child.